Welcome to the City Rev Life podcast. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you are watching this or listening. My name is Justin. I'm sitting here with Pastor Craig.
Hey.
And we are doing a little mini-series on the topic of Christmas. And today we are talking about Santa Claus.
It's the big one. We've been talking about Christmas traditions.
And there is none quite like Santa Claus.
No, he's the mascot of Christmas these days. He's
Yes.
the guy you see in all the commercials and the parades, the Coca-Cola
Yes.
bottles.
That is the famous American conception of Santa is from Coca-Cola, right?
Yeah, it's on the Coke bottles, they defined him.
So specifically, Craig, what is it that we're talking about in regards to Santa Claus on our show today?
So a question we get a lot is how, as Christians, should we deal with Santa? Maybe, quote, if you've been asked, quote unquote, does your family do the Santa thing?
Do you guys do the Santa thing?
Do you do the Santa thing?
Oh, no, we don't do the Santa thing.
Do your kids believe in Santa? Is it okay for my kids to believe?
Yes.
in
Will
Santa?
there be half-eaten milk and cookies
Yes.
on Christmas morning in your house?
Yes, reindeer footprints.
Yeah.
Wait,
Never heard of those.
That's
next
extreme.
level.
That's extreme.
On the rooftop?
Yeah, no, just the living room.
Okay.
They leave glitter footprints. You didn't know that reindeers did that?
I did not know.
Yeah, apparently they do. And so this is a question we do get a lot, right?
Yeah,
especially for people that maybe are either new to the church or new to the faith, or maybe you've got married and now you had like the way that your family dealt with Santa Claus, and now you get married and it's like, oh, this is the way that my spouse's family deals with Santa Claus.
Yeah.
There's just a lot to navigate
Yes.
about should I let my kids believe in Santa. But I want to talk just briefly about a little bit of where this story comes from and Santa Claus comes from. So Santa is based on a real person in history. From all we know, there was a really popular bishop named Saint Nicholas, and he lived in Myra in modern day Turkey, and he was a bishop there, like the 3rd century, like 200s, late 200s AD,
1700, 1800 years ago.
Yeah, long time ago, and he was really popular. And so what we know is that he served the church and lived in Turkey. We don't know much about him. Really, when you get to the history of it, we don't know a ton about him. But we know that then what happened is he grew in popularity, and all these legends and stories, even from like the Middle Ages, come up, and he became a really popular saint in the Christian church. He became known as like a defender of children, as a gift giver, generous.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these traditions that we know then as Santa Claus of, hey, delivering presents, that they all kind of sprung out of these legends and these stories about him. But then really what became the Santa we know really was, the Coca-Cola bottle, the advertisements in the 40s and 50s, and he became the jolly old elf with the red suit who comes down the chimney, and that it all kind of crystallized into the Santa that we know today.
So based on a real person, by the way, spoiler alert, if you haven't caught it already, hopefully that, if you're one of the
kids listening,
we might need to restart this. No, but he's based on a true person, really lived, that we know some details about his life, but the history is kind of laced with legend.
Right.
It's hard to weed through what is actual historically credible content about who Nicholas was. But we do know some things, and that he was a real person, and so people kind of took it and ran with it.
Yeah.
Based on some of the legends about him, and he became kind of this icon of the Christmas season. And to be honest, let's be real, he was commercialized and leveraged for profit. Making Christmas, the Christmas celebration, something that involves a lot of spending is lucrative for businesses that have an interest in that. And so from that, we got all the movies, we got all that kind of stuff. Okay,
certainly gone hand in hand. Yep.
So that's a little bit about his origin story. How would you help us think through, hey, with my kids, if we're Christians, and for us, Christmas is about Jesus, how should we handle Santa? What are some things we should think about when it comes to doing the Santa thing?
Yeah, I think there are varying degrees which families participate and celebrate Christmas specifically with Santa, and different ways that Christian families handle telling their kids about Santa, right? So you have maybe on one side of the spectrum, You have the families that are all in on Santa. Like we do the whole thing, we look for him in the night sky. We, elf on the shelf, right? We're, leaving the cookies out. We're, doing all the stuff, all the things that come along with Santa. And our kids think that Santa is a real person, that he really comes and delivers presents, and we're in, like we're there. And then you'll have people who are Christians on the other side, right? For, their reasons to say, we don't talk about Santa. Maybe we tell our kids the story, but we tell them he's not real. We don't, have pictures of him up. We don't do anything. It's just like about Jesus, right? Like this is a day to celebrate Jesus. And I think all within that range is, everyone else kind of falls into that range. There's a lot of options there for Christians. So I'd say for those of you listening, watching, thinking about this, like, hey, how should I handle the Santa question? Should my kids believe in Santa? First off, I'd say there's freedom there. I think if we want to get kind of Bible nerdy, technical, right? Like Santa is part of our culture, definitely part of like American culture. And I think when I read through the New Testament and I read about people who follow after Jesus, there's a lot of room there for people to still live in ways that are in line with their culture, but also submit their lives to Christ. There's a lot of freedom there. And I think of like the Jerusalem Council, right? And I think of like the Gentiles came into the faith, and it was a lot of, hey, you can still live your life. You don't have to follow these laws, these Jewish laws. Like here, you still love Jesus. Like there's freedom there in that. Yeah. But also as Christians, we know that our primary allegiance and our primary citizenship is in heaven. And so there are times where we look at our culture and we question it, right?
Yeah.
So I think so I think there's room for us to be thoughtful in how we celebrate Christmas and how we embrace Santa. So I would say a couple things. One, I'd say for the family that is like all in on Santa Claus, like that's okay. Like you want to, you probably have a good heart behind it. It's probably like parents who like, we want our kids to kind of experience the Christmas magic and all that stuff, or the traditions of our family, all those things. Like that's all good and fine. Like that's cool. But some warnings in that I would say is don't let Santa become, bigger than Jesus in the season, right? It's still about Jesus. What we celebrate at Christmas is the birth of Jesus. So let's not let Santa become bigger than him, right? Yeah. And so maybe there are ways you can recenter your family on Jesus in Christmas, right? So I think like, we're here at City River, we're here at the church, like going to church is a great way to do that, to remind people here's what we're about. I know a lot of families will read the birth story, the Bethlehem story out of Luke, during Christmas time. And you can do Santa included in your Christmas celebration, but it's about Jesus. I think that's good to keep in mind. The other thing I would think would just be a caution. And honestly, this comes more from personal experience. I remember being around a family several years ago, and it wasn't even Christmas time. Like it wasn't even December. It was like August. And I remember the kid was being wild, misbehaving. And I remember the dad saying, hey, like you need to cut that out. You need to remember Santa's watching. Yeah. And I was like, this is a little too far. Like, too far. Like it's not, we got to be careful. Like some of the things we share about Santa, some of the beliefs about Santa, right? Like he sees you when you're sleeping, right? He knows if you've been naughty or not. Like
he knows when you're awake.
Yeah, he knows when you're awake. It's like there's a little bit too much. Like and honestly, it's we laugh about it as adults, right? But there is, and I want to give our kids credit. I think kids understand when we're playing and pretending and imagining things, and I think that's okay. But you just want to be clear about that as a parent of Santa's not like God, right? Like God is our judge, and really even our lives, and really what I think is probably most damaging when we think about the naughty or nice list and that becoming too big in our house is that it can teach a moralism to our kids that to be accepted and loved, you got to be good. And that's really not the heart of the gospel at all, right? Like the gospel is the opposite. It's because of God's love, right? Jesus died on the cross for my sins, and none of us can ever be good enough, right? And so I think there's something to just be cautious with when you're talking about the naughty or nice list.
Yeah, and one of the things I heard you say when we were talking about this was Saint Nicholas would not appreciate you making the celebration of the birth of Christ about him.
Yeah, he would have hated that, right? If he was here today and he saw that there were families that talked about him more than Jesus, he would have been like, no, this is my whole life was about pointing people to Jesus. Yeah.
Yes.
I think so. So I think we've got to be cautious, right? Now, and there are plenty of fun things you can do. And I think it's great to celebrate and have fun with your kids and have them, use their imagination and creativity and you kind of believe in that magic and wonder. I think it's beautiful, you know? And so I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying there are some cautions there for if we think he's real and treat it that way.
Yeah, and what I think you're cueing us to do is to, even for those of us who maybe when we grew up, like the magic of Christmas and waking up on Christmas morning and seeing what Santa put out was a big part of our childhood. Just because that's the case and we want to include some of that in our family with our kids, doesn't mean we need to swallow whole what the culture teaches us or informs about Santa or the songs we sing.
Right.
So I love what you're pointing out, like leveraging being on the naughty or nice list to try and coerce your child's behavior. It's not a good move. It's not the way of the gospel. And so that's a caution. And then making sure the focus is on Jesus, making your Christmas celebration Christ-centered and helping our kids understand what this is about. And the moment that Santa or anything in our celebration of Christmas hijacks the celebration from its true meaning, we need to think critically about that and say, hey, we want to make sure we're celebrating what actually matters here.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to do it. And just, use wisdom, caution, be sensible about it. The other side of the spectrum I think we should talk about are the people who are, I don't know another way to put it, anti-Santa. Just like, no Santa in my house. Jesus is the reason for the season. Like, that's it, right? And for people who believe in that, I think it comes from a good place, right? Like they want Jesus to be the sole focus, and Santa can be, maybe someone who detracts from the focus on Jesus, or maybe it's a problem with the commercialism, like you talked about. Like, there's a lot of reasons, right? And I think that's a valid position to take and a valid way to celebrate Christmas is to leave Santa out and focus on Jesus, focus on really the biblical story and that kind of stuff. But I would say that there are also maybe some wisdom and some advice for us to think through if that's the camp that you fall into. And really, I would say it comes down to loving your neighbor, and there's just the way for if that's where you fall and you say, hey, our family doesn't do the Santa thing, to still be kind to the families that do. One thing that can kind of come up in our heart is that we can feel a little bit superior, maybe.
Yeah, self-righteousness.
Yeah, right. Like, oh, well, our family doesn't do, like, our family's, we're real Christian. We focus on, that's self-righteousness. And again, for most of the people out there, sadly, most of the people in our city and most of the people in our country who celebrate Christmas and look at Santa, they probably don't really actually even know Jesus. And so it just kind of seems like, oh, wow, man, like if I become a Christian, then Christmas can't be fun, and it can just be this rain on my parade. If we're not careful to just show them love and be kind, we can really come off as judgmental or self-righteous and really push people away from Jesus with that attitude.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a really helpful reminder. And, whether or not you participate in this story, whether or not you use, the Easter Bunny, is the other one, or the Tooth Fairy. That's not connected to a Christian holiday, but like kind of these mythical character stories that we use with our children, that some use with their children, that are little fun ways of surprising them on certain days. We don't want to use that as a badge of righteousness, whether or not we do that.
And I think a good reminder in this conversation too is just a reminder of how much parents lead their kids, right? Like our kids look to us on what to say and what to do. And so anyway you're having this conversation with adults, with other families, I think you're going to be the one that's going to lead that conversation. Your kids are going to repeat a lot of what you say. So if you're dealing with other families who have other opinions on Santa, they're going to repeat the things that you say. So remember to be kind, remember to be loving. And I think it would be good for us just to talk about maybe some practical ways then if you're wrestling with this question. Maybe you've got young kids, you're saying, hey, I'm trying to figure out how we do this with our family, and just share a little bit. I can share personally how we kind of handle it. And that's for us as we really treat Santa as like a character in the Christmas story, right? So we say, hey, he's a character. He's based on a real person, but we tell our kids, he's not real, but we like to, there's people that like to dress up like him. There's people that like to, he's in a lot of movies and shows. There's other imaginary characters that we play around and celebrate. We take pictures with Spider-Man, if we see him at a birthday party, right? There's like, he's a character. He's out there, and, we coach our kids and let them know, hey, there's going to be a lot of kids out there that think he's a real person, and it's not your job to tell them no, to ruin it for them, right? But then also giving our kids to say, hey, if someone asks you what you think, you don't have to lie. Say, hey, this is what we think about Santa. We see him he's a fun character for Christmas that we like to, enjoy. We go see him at Bass Pro Shop, and we go take a picture with him. It's great. It's great. Yeah. It's a great one to go. But we take pictures with him doing that sort of thing. So there's a lot of room out there for your family. You can kind of control the level to which you want to embrace the customs of our culture, right, in your family.
Yeah. And I think what maybe a concluding thought as we wrap this episode up is we would just say, be thoughtful. Mm-hmm. Be purposeful with what you do with your kids. Don't just do what your parents did for you, as nostalgic as that might be. Maybe you end up doing that because it was really great and wonderful, but be thoughtful about that, and make sure that you are thinking about your Christmas celebration, whatever that looks like, whether it's Noche Buena, whether it's Christmas morning. Make sure you're being thoughtful to make the emphasis on Jesus. And there's some freedom and some different ways that we can go about doing that. So we hope this is helpful. And if there's somebody that would benefit from this, share it with them. But with that, we'll wrap up this episode of the City Rev Life podcast. Merry Christmas.
Thank you so much for listening to the City Rev Life podcast. Feel free to subscribe or leave a rate and review. If you want more content or additional resources, head to cityrev.org or download our app. We hope you have a great day.